You're in the main conference.
Operator.
Okay, great. So welcome, everybody. It's 2 o'clock, and we want to welcome you to the first of the NSP Open Forums, an opportunity to ask questions from HUD experts. And we have David Nagura and John Laswick here with us, and I'm going to let them introduce themselves in just a moment. This is Marcia Tonkovich with ICF. And if you are having trouble either getting the live meeting link, or if you're having trouble with your audio or any questions related to the conference call, please call Courtney. And her phone number was in the email that came to you earlier, but just in case you don't have it, it is 703-225-2807. So call Courtney if you have any questions at all throughout the conference related to technology issues. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and welcome you to the conference and talk a little bit about how we're going to walk through the PowerPoints, and then I'm going to turn it over to John and David to begin the technical content. So your moderators are John Laswick and David Nagura, and why don't you guys introduce yourselves now, and then I'll go through the instructions on how to ask a question.
Hi, I'm John Laswick, and I've been working for HUD for the whole life of the NSP program, so I see a lot of familiar faces and names out there, so thanks for joining us.
Hi, I'm David Noguera. I've been working on NSP policy for a good while now, and I respond to a number of questions through the email, by phone, and et cetera.
Great. And you guys are very lucky to have these two here with us today. They're both the ones who've been asking and answering the policy directives you've seen, as well as literally hundreds of FAQs and the ask a questions that you've seen on the website. So they should be able to walk you through the technical questions you have. So with that, let me walk you through how to ask a question. So the first thing that we ask that you do, if you are on the live meeting, if you look in the upper right-hand corner of your screen, you should see a button that says Feedback. And if you go under the Feedback, and you'll see that there's a series of different colored boxes. The first one says Need Help, and it goes on through Proceed. If you have a question, we ask that you go ahead and turn your button to purple, to the question. So turn your bullet to question. That'll tell us that we have you in the queue, and that'll allow us to keep track of the volume of questions that we have. Then we ask that you push *1 on your phone. So again, that's *1 on your phone, and that will put you in the queue with the operator. And the operator is then going to feed the questions to David and John in time order. So whoever asks first will get answered first, and so forth. So press *1 when you're ready to ask a question. And then if your question's already been answered, you're in the queue, but somebody asks a similar question, and so you don't need to ask yours anymore. To get out of the queue, press *2 to remove yourself from the list. So again, we'll ask the operator to take us through them in time order, and we'll get through all of your questions in that way. After your question has been answered, or again, if a similar question is answered for you, go ahead and go back to where it says Feedback and change your status from question back to green to Proceed, so that we know that we've covered your question. So that's the way we're going to handle asking of the questions. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn over the presentation to John and David to walk you through the questions that we've gotten so far.
Okay, thanks a lot. Thanks, Marcia. A couple of things. We, at the last minute this morning, got called into a 3:30 meeting, so we probably won't be able to go much past 3:30. This is kind of the trial run of what we hope to be a regular series of open forums, which I think are going to help people both because they're interactive and because people can hear questions from other places and kind of get some angles on things, or maybe even get some good ideas. We hope there's some peer guidance that you all can help provide to each other too. And so I apologize. I can see that we're already sort of hitting our limit as far as number of people that we have on the line, so we didn't think that we'd get that many with such a late notice, and I apologize. That was my fault for screwing up the notice yesterday. So congratulations for getting here. Before we talk about the questions, we've just recently gotten Yolanda Chavez's approval to structure a series of webinars over the next couple of months and probably beyond. And we're going to have webinars every Tuesday and Thursday at 2 o'clock Eastern Time so that you can kind of plan for those. We'll have a schedule out pretty soon because we already know what we want to do. We're just going to make sure people are available for those dates. So Tuesdays will be technical Tuesdays, and those will be things that are technical requirements that sometimes people call cross-cutting requirements, procurement, Uniform Act, tenant protections, Section 3, environmental, things that apply to pretty much all of HUD's programs, but that have their own special little excitement for the NSP program. And then on Thursdays, we intend to alternate between an open forum and a policy subject. So Thursdays will be kind of policy Thursdays, and we're hoping that these are actually targeted to different audiences, so we're not asking every grantee to spend 4 hours a week with us. As much as we love you, we know you're busy, and so that's kind of how we're intending to go forward. Now, if we can get some support, and if we need to present a special topic, another topic, we are willing to go beyond 2 a week, but I think we want to give you that certainty and give you that predictability so that you can get your questions answered, or you can hear the bigger picture on some of these things. So next Monday we have and this is set up before the schedule kind of worked out, but next Monday we have our own Dean of Accounting and Finance, Paul Webster, talking about obligations, and I think you've all seen the guidance that we came out with pretty recently, and Paul's going to answer questions about that. And then on Tuesday, we want to help communities that are still struggling with their 25% set-aside requirement to try to come up with some strategies and do some problem solving so that you can make that goal and that requirement successfully. And then we'll go into if we can set something up for next Thursday, we're going to try to do that. And then the following week we'll have a technical topic on Tuesday and an open forum on Thursday. And the following week a technical topic on Tuesday and a policy presentation on Thursday. So that's kind of the way we're going to run this. Now, of course, you still have access to the Ask a Question. The resources on the Resource Exchange are a growing list. We'll probably schedule a separate session when the toolkits are announced for the single-family and multifamily programs. Those are imminent. So we're happy that we're getting a lot of information out. We realize that it would have been nice to have it sooner, but and we're not trying to drown you with information, but hopefully if you need something, it's going to be available to you.
Right.
So we picked through some recent questions that we've seen just to kind of kick off the discussion today. We're just going to go through these kind of quickly. And Marcia, were you going to read the questions or summarize the questions for us?
I believe David was going to actually walk us through them. Is that correct, David?
I don't have them in front of me.
Okay, I'm happy to walk us through them. How about if I summarize the question, and then you guys give the answer?
Sure,
Sounds
that'd be great. Thanks.
Okay, so we've recently had a series of questions relating to sort of the timing of when an entity acquires property and whether it retains its status as a foreclosed unit. And then similarly, we've had questions related to if a property is privately acquired, whether or not NSP can be used to provide down payment assistance for that privately acquired property. And so the question really relates, the timing question particularly relates to units that are acquired by a developer or by an individual prior to when they are under NSP contract. And the down payment one particularly relates to privately acquired units where NSP might be used as the down payment source.
Right. So here I think what the first thing we need to establish is whether the property was purchased with the intent to use NSP funds to address it, whether it be through rehab, through down payment assistance, or anything. Right. So if it was a developer and or a home buyer purchasing the property and they had an NSP contract at the time of acquisition, then under those circumstances, it would be eligible. If this is a property that was thought of after the fact, however, that NSP was a possibility, then it wouldn't be used towards what did we say here? It wouldn't be used towards it wouldn't be used as a foreclosure or as an abandoned property, but eligible use E would be an option available to them.
There's a further complication with the timing of environmental reviews, and we are actually kind of struggling with that right now and trying to get a little better answer than we are currently putting out. So we're going to skip over that and keep our fingers crossed, and hopefully have something that makes it more accessible.
And on the related note, guys, on the down payment, do you just want to say where there was a slightly edited document that came out from NASED yesterday that dealt with this issue of down payment assistance that I think you guys wanted to expand a little bit on related to FHA.
Yeah, I sent a note to NASED, but they put out a word because FHA in March issued some guidance to its homeownership centers to, in effect, sort of tell them to loosen up on some of the requirements, that they had some flexibility. But one place they don't have flexibility is on providing down payment assistance. And the reason they don't have flexibility is because the HERA legislation in the FHA part of it said that only government agencies can provide down payment assistance, and the seller of the property cannot provide the down payment assistance. So the result of those two facts is that if a public agency had acquired a property and then planned to give down payment assistance, just the half of the down payment assistance that's allowed under FHA or under HUD rules, they would have to transfer that ownership of that property to a nonprofit. And we realize that's not a great answer. FHA is not thrilled with it, but that's just what they have to live with. So what we've tried to suggest, and we have some guidance coming out in the next couple of days, is that you restructure your down payment assistance via by paying closing costs or other things that a buyer would have to bring to the table in terms of cash, and stay away from the down payment assistance. In the case of FHA, since their minimum down payment is 3.5%, we're talking your half of it would be 1.75%. So if you got a $100,000 mortgage, you're talking about a $1,750 infusion of cash. We're hoping, and we haven't seen any numbers yet, but we're hoping that it's possible to make that up in other ways. This does not limit you as far as providing soft seconds,
principal buy down,
right? Any of the other homeownership assistance forms of support for housing, but in the case of FHA, if it's a nonprofit that's going to be providing the soft second or the financing, the financial assistance, they need to get FHA approval. So there's we'll have something out in a couple of days, but there is a website that you can go to sign up for that approval.
So, guys, the bottom line here is that this issue about the providing down payment assistance is exclusive to properties which have FHA financing. It is not applicable to other types of properties that you might be assisting with NSP. So let's move on to the next question, which was there's been a lot of confusion about how grantees can obligate construction costs when there is not yet a construction contract with a general contractor. There might be a contract between the grantee and a developer, and there might also be a contract between the grantee and a subrecipient. And so the question was, how is it different between a developer and a subrecipient, and how can grantees obligate construction costs when there is not yet a construction contract?
Okay. Well, that's a good question, and it really, the answer depends on the entity that you have the contract with. So a developer is considered a beneficiary, a third-party entity, in which case if you have a contract with the developer, then your funds are considered obligated, even though
when they have an estimate.
right when they have an estimate to carry out the work, even though they may not have hired the contractor that's going to carry out that work yet. On the other hand, if you have a contract with a subrecipient is considered an extension of the grantee. So it's merely having a contract with a subrecipient would not be considered an obligation unless that subrecipient has contracts with the subs that are going to be actually carrying out the work.
The construction contract.
Right.
Construction contract.
And that would be true for grantees as well. So grantees and subrecipients need to have signed construction contracts. Developers only need to have detailed cost estimates.
Yeah. And the detailed cost estimate, guys, would be an addendum to or a part of the contract between the grantee and the developer.
Right.
Okay. The next one is operating subsidies for rental property. So the question is, how can NSP funds be used to pay for operating subsidies up front, both maintenance reserves as well as replacement reserves and ongoing operating subsidies, and how is that different up front as opposed to ongoing?
Okay, so you cannot subsidize a rental property on an ongoing basis. You can subsidize a rental property up front if the lender requires a replacement reserve to be established or a loan loss reserve or other reserves that are customary in your marketplace and that are sized appropriately, not $1 million for a 4-unit project. So that said, you can subsidize the price of the transaction at the front end down to a level as far as you can afford to keep the price low as it goes forward, but you cannot promise to make monthly payments to write down the costs of operating a rental project with NSP funds.
Okay, great. Let me get to a couple more, and then we do have some folks in the queue who have some questions. So the next one is the timing of the new definition of abandoned. As you guys know, the definition was expanded in the last couple of weeks with the notice that came out. And one of the things that changed is the ability to use code enforcement actions where the owner of the property was given 90 days to correct that violation and did not do so as a part of a definition of abandoned. And so the questions that have come in have related to acquisitions that occurred prior to the timing of that code action. So the grantee bought the property, then the code action happened, and the question is, if the code action happens after the grantee has acquired the property, does that still count as abandoned?
And the answer is no. It really needs to go in order. So we've allowed more flexibility in meeting the abandoned definition, but it still has to be in sequence. So just like anything, you can't buy it and then sort of try to make it eligible retroactively. It's got to be eligible. You can't change the order of the activities that need to take place to establish its eligibility. I would say, though, that in a lot of cases, it seems to me that it might be easier to make the same property meet the definition of foreclosed. So, even if you're thinking, oh, this is abandoned and it's been it's been subject to these code violations, and then you find out, oh, well, it was too late for that. Well, maybe it was in default when you acquired it, and so maybe it can qualify that way. So.
Yeah. And if you look at the guidance that we put out on the impact of the new definitions, you'll see some tables that we put in there, and you can see just how the two definitions compare to one another. There is some overlap between the two definitions. So.
Great. Okay, last one, and then we'll jump on to questions from the crowd. So we've had a series of questions related to bulk purchases and how the appraisals work for that. And the questions related to, if I'm going to buy 10 or 15 or 20 units in a bulk purchase, could I just do a master appraisal of all of those 20 units? Or do I, in fact, have to appraise each unit, and are there any exceptions to when I don't have to appraise each unit?
Okay, just to do it real quickly here, you cannot appraise properties in bulk. You have to appraise them one at a time. But in many cases, the properties that you're talking about are going to be worth less than $25,000, and therefore you can do an estimate according to our newer interpretations rather than, I think it's in the bridge notice.
It's in the bridge notice. If you look at the June 19th, 2009 bridge notice,
you'll
tell you
how
some guidelines on what's expected.
Right.
Okay. All right. Well, guys, we have a couple of folks who are in the queue for questions. And, again, reminder to everybody, in order to get in the queue, we need you to do two things. First, in the top right-hand corner of your screen, you will see a button that says Feedback. Click down on that and change your status from green to purple, and that will let us know that you need to ask a question. And then what you need to do is press *1 on your phone, and you have to get in the queue that way. So don't just change the button, but actually press *1 on your phone, and the operator will put you in the queue, and then we'll go through them in order. So, operator, why don't you go ahead and give us the first person with a question?
Millie Babick with City of Cape Coral. Your line is open.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hi, how are you?
Yeah, hi. I have a question. In a recent NSP clinic that we had in Fort Lauderdale, there was some, I think, mild confusion regarding the 25% set aside and use E, that is redevelopment of or demolish of vacant properties. So can we undertake eligible use E, redevelopment of a foreclosed vacant lot, to meet the 25% set aside?
Yeah, that's been a confusing subject, and I apologize for any contributions that we've made to that. But here's the thing: there's two different requirements that you have, and as far as an eligible use, you have different categories for different types of property. But the 25% set aside requires another layer of another standard, which is that you have the properties are foreclosed or abandoned residential properties. Now, if you have a foreclosed or abandoned residential property that is vacant and can be used and can fit under the eligible use E category, then you could, for example, build new housing that would count towards your 25% set aside. Yeah. But the real trigger on that thing is on the set aside is the foreclosed and abandoned residential property.
Right.
We've seen all these great projects for schools that want to convert old schools into senior housing. Wonderful thing to do. You can't do it and claim it for your set aside. But
the property has to start out as either a foreclosed or abandoned home or just a residential property for you to count it towards the 25% set aside.
And I ask you a question. What if it is a foreclosed vacant lot and we redevelop it as a multifamily?
The key word that you just said there is foreclosed. But the other word that I'm looking for is, you said foreclosed vacant lot. What's it zoned? What is it zoned? Multifamily. Okay, so it's zoned residential.
It's a zoned residential with a future land use multifamily.
Right. So you could do that.
So you could do that. That'd be eligible.
And what is then considered to be obligated under this activity E? Like we would have to have a contract with the developer.
Yeah, whoever, are you buying the property or is the developer buying the property?
We have a contract with the developer, with the housing authority. They would be our developer, and they will contract someone to, let's say, to build it.
All right. So you would have two places to obligate funds there. One is with the purchase of the property, or really with the developer. It only has to be identified. So as soon as you enter into an agreement with a developer for a specific property, you've obligated the acquisition. And then when the developer has a detailed cost estimate for the construction of the new apartments, then you would be able to obligate those funds. And on Monday, we're going to go into this a lot more, and then you can also proportionally, at the same time, obligate the proportional activity delivery costs, your project administration costs, so, along with that, sort of hard costs.
Thank you.
We have about 10 folks in the queue, so operator, who's next?
We'll go next to Maria Ludwig with Harris County.
Maria, are you there?
Her line has disconnected. We'll go next to Nicole Brookshire with City of Milwaukee.
Hi, good afternoon. I have a question in regards to the new definition of abandoned, piggybacking off of that thought process of how there was a change or a revision to a definition, going back to the bridge notice from June 19th of 2009, where it spoke of the discount change from being 15% to 1%.
Right.
It was mentioned that with the new definition of abandoned that you can't go retroactive. It has to follow in a certain process. Does that same theory apply when we're talking about the 15% going down to 1% for the discount?
No.
Oh, no.
Okay. So if the 1% would be technically retroactive to anything, if we applied it to anything that we closed prior to, or excuse me, after June 19th, but an application was taken and we had like a contract agreement with the purchaser for a home, it would be acceptable?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Sure.
Okay, operator, who's next on the line?
We'll go next to Michael Johnson with Bay County.
Michael?
Yes, sir. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. My question has to do with clarification regarding the appraisals. There's a 60-day window from what I was told regarding the appraisals, and I'm just a little concerned about that because banks are taking an inordinate amount of time in deciding on whether they're accepting our offer. And I can't see, I have 10, 15 properties that I'm bidding on that I'm going to do an appraisal in advance, especially if I'm not going to win the bid.
Yeah. The timing of the appraisal is tied to when you made the last offer, right? So if you made the offer, if you made your offer today, right, your final offer, then you can count back 60 days, and that's the period that would be considered eligible. Right, anytime within that period, but that doesn't help you a whole lot. If you're out bidding on properties, then to some extent you're going to have to have a sense of what the property is worth as part of your bids. You may not pay for an appraisal to be done until your bid is accepted or something.
Right. Well, so you have a 60-day window there. So let's say you make a bid, you make an offer, and they accept it, and you get a contract contingent upon finishing your environmental reviews and all the other things that you love to do, and you have some time to get that appraisal done, and then if they accept your price, then you're okay. If they come back and say, well, we want to raise it or lower it, well, they're not going to lower it, but if they want to raise it, then you can get an update to the appraisal. Most markets that can be done pretty quickly, and it doesn't cost a lot.
Right. Yeah, but you wouldn't be out getting appraisals for every property that you bid on. Yes, that would be a waste of money.
Okay, thank you. And I also have a second question with regard to multifamily units as part of the 25% set-aside. Maintenance costs during that affordability period, grass cutting is not an eligible expense?
No, it is.
Well,
it would be an eligible disposition expense.
You mean before you renovate the property or something?
While you're preparing the property?
No, he's asking during the affordability period, guys.
No, I think that would be so that would be a standard operating cost.
Yeah.
You just have to hope. I mean, when you're underwriting the thing, you've got to make sure the rents that you can get are going to cover the expenses.
Cover those expenses, yeah.
And that's why I say you can. You look at that, and then you may need to back into a deeper subsidy on the purchase or something like that, so that the monthly income has enough
to support the cost of cutting the grass.
Is that what you meant?
That's exactly what I meant.
Okay.
And I guess the third question, while I have you here, I'm sorry. I guess what kind of strategies or ideas are you going to come up with for those governments that have not accomplished their 25% set-aside yet?
Well, we've got the HUD torture handbook is in revision, and actually we have not even started writing the notice that has to be written to describe that, so I can't tell you.
That's to be determined.
All right,
okay,
guys,
great.
We have about a dozen questions in the queue, and then for anybody who emailed in a question, we're only taking the questions verbally. So if you did email in a question, please go ahead and press *1 to get into the queue so that you can ask John and David your question. So, again, the process is press *1. Also, if you have changed your dot to purple but you've had your question answered, please go ahead and change yourself back to green so that we know you've been answered. So, operator, go ahead and give us the next call.
We'll go next to Valerie Fontaine with City of Atlanta.
Hi,
Hello?
Valerie.
Hi. My question is in regards to land banking. My understanding is that land banking activity can only be undertaken by a subrecipient. It cannot be undertaken by a developer. Is that correct?
It has to be a governmental or nonprofit.
Yeah, not a developer.
Right.
Okay, so my follow-up question to that is, our land bank authority is currently not a public authority. They actually are a nonprofit. So as I allocate funding to them for land banking as well as for other activities, can I actually classify them as a developer, or do they have to be classified as a subrecipient?
What are they doing? I mean, most land banks are just kind of holding the property, so what do you need them to be a developer for?
Okay, so we're allocating money to them under Activity C, Activity E, and Activity B.
Okay.
And so the properties that they acquire under Activity B and E that are not going to be land banked but are going to be then passed on to another entity for development,
right.
Can we allocate money to them to also pass on rehab dollars to those agencies?
You'd probably want two separate agreements with them,
yeah.
right? Because
and I actually have three, one for each activity.
Okay, yeah, because the way we define a developer is one who acquires and rehabs properties. You wouldn't want to use that same designation for someone that's acquiring and land banking it.
Right.
Right.
But you could, yes. But the sort of the underlying question is you may select a nonprofit or to be a developer and negotiate an agreement with them to do development work for which they receive development fees and so forth. Keep your agreements separate.
Yeah. And I would also suggest be very careful about your scopes of work so that there's no overlap between them. So you have a clear scope of work for when they're being a developer and a clear scope of work for when they're managing a land bank.
Right, and I think my bigger question just goes back as because we can now obligate money based on cost estimates for developers, if they have rehab money allocated to them, whether or not I actually have to have them get a construction contract for those rehab dollars or whether or not I can obligate it based off our cost estimates.
Estimates are okay for developers only. Yes, you can, but you have to have good estimates. It isn't just like it's going to be about $100,000.
Yeah, just please make sure those things are kept separate though, because the land banking that sort of gets me concerned.
Okay, so our next operator, let's go on to our next question, please.
The next question comes from Tracy Harvey with City of Dover.
Hello. Does program income you receive from a developer, the grantee is allowed to retain 10% for admin. Can that be utilized for CDBG admin, or does it have to go to NSP admin?
Any program income has to be used for NSP projects at this point. I mean, maybe in the future when we're kind of winding down the program, that'll change. You don't necessarily get program income from a developer, though. I mean, you can negotiate that.
We wouldn't classify it as program income.
Normally, you would get program income from a subrecipient, and most people go to developers because they don't have to get into the program income question.
Well, after we sell the properties, after the property is sold, we ask the developer to return the program income to the grantee to get a better handle on it.
Okay. So any money that's coming back to you, to you, the grantee, is considered program income.
Right. Yeah, you can do that. I mean, if they'll sign that agreement, you can do that, and you have to use you can use 10% of it for general administration, but it has to be for the NSP program.
NSP? Okay.
Right.
Thank you.
Okay, guys, we still have a number in the queue, so let's go to our next caller.
We'll go next to Thomas Wilson with Chicanas for La Casa.
Good morning. I understood you to say that down payment assistance can only be provided by instrumentalities of units of government.
Only for FHA properties.
Right.
Okay.
And that nonprofits can do self-seconds and buy-downs. Are those buy-downs, in regards to those buy-downs, are you addressing principal or interest
principal buy-downs.
Yeah, so you could do principal, interest, closing costs.
Yeah, you can buy down the interest, buy down the principal, pay for closing costs.
Right. So, I mean, in the larger scheme of things, that half the down payment that you can provide isn't usually a big number. But the difference is that it's an equity number rather than a debt number. So, having a really low debt doesn't necessarily put more money in your pocket to get you to the closing table. So.
Okay. The next question I have in regards to that, on the soft seconds, can the nonprofit be the beneficiary on the promissory note and trustee on the deed of trust?
Yeah, as long as your consortium or whatever is good with that, that's not a problem.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. So let's go on to the next caller, please.
The next call comes from Ann Cheney with Commonwealth of Kentucky.
Hi, Ann. How are you?
Oh, I'm fine. How are you all today?
Good, good.
This is like a live game of Jeopardy. We sure do appreciate it.
Good.
I've got actually 3 questions, but they're all fairly brief. The first question is, we have funded a subrecipient to do land banking, and we understand with the update on obligation that they can now obligate their ongoing operation and maintenance costs. Those are eligible as part of the land banking activity. But since they've never done that before, are any guidance on how cost reasonableness, how one might document that?
Well, I guess I would suggest that you look at your marketplace, and you've got realtors there, I'm sure, who do property management on a fee basis. So that gives you one point of reference. There may be some other property that the municipality I know you're with the state, so if it's a county or a city or a town or something, they may have other property that they manage. You could look to that as a standard or a measurement, and then
we'd want to see the work that they're doing, that they're carrying out, spelled out in the contract, and what you're paying for them.
It's going to be a challenge to distinguish between delivery and administrative costs.
Right. Well, it really doesn't matter when it comes right down to it, because it's coming out of the same line item. So, as far as that goes, I wouldn't worry about it. How much you're paying is what you got to worry about. So if you're paying $9 an hour for somebody to pick up trash, maybe that's more than standard.
Well, but it could be coming out of the disposition line item. Right. Not just program income. You can use one or the other.
Well, disposition is part of land banking, though. So, so the eligible activity under CDBG is disposition, and it covers all those sort of maintenance costs. How you gauge the appropriateness of them, it's just a little trickier.
Yeah. I think you'd want to be prepare yourself to justify the cost that you're paying.
Okay. All right. Thank you for that. Next question, just real quickly. Will this be archived and posted for future viewing?
Yes, it's being recorded. We're all being recorded, and it's also a video recording as well.
Okay, that was the bunny question. That was the easy one, and I'm glad the answer is yes.
But we are going to be doing these just about every other week, and depending on how well they're received, we might even do them more frequently.
We have bought a whole case of microwave popcorn, David.
Great.
So, last question.
Sit back and have a good time.
Is there still any discussion of allowing non-foreclosed, non-abandoned properties, in essence the ones assisted under eligible use E as vacant or demolished? Any continued discussion on the possibility of being able to include those properties under the low-income set-aside? We have a couple of different projects that are providing housing for folks that are homeless. Clearly, they have incomes below 50%. They're great projects. We've had to up everybody else's low-income set-aside obligations to cover those because they're projects in high-need areas that need to be done. But we would like to see some relaxation, as it were, of the eligible property types for the low-income set-aside.
Yeah, it's not. I got to say, I don't think there's any active consideration of that, Ann. That's a matter for Congress, and they have pretty much stayed away from a lot of suggestions they've been getting on this program. So what we were trying to do with the new definitions was to make it easier to make some properties foreclosed or abandoned, but if they're not residential or,
if it's not permanent housing, you still have a problem.
Oh, these are both permanent supportive rental housing, but that's okay. I understand. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Okay.
Thanks, Ann. We have about 19 questions in the queue, guys, and we do only have until 3:30. So I would ask for folks who are queued up, if you could stick to the most important part of your question, try to keep it to one part. That would be great, so we can try to help everybody through this call. So who's next on our line?
We'll go next to Deborah Bustos with Urban Land Commissary.
Good afternoon. This is a question about multifamily and the open bid process.
Okay.
We acquired a foreclosed multifamily property with NSP dollars, partly using them for acquisition, partly planning to use them for rehab. Our intention is to transfer this property to another nonprofit organization as soon as they can assemble basically the permanent financing to do the long-term ownership and long-term rehab. My question relates to the fact that that particular nonprofit is now serving as the property management agent. And to do the rehab, I am wondering, can I pay, as the owner who acquired the property, can I pay that property management agent a project management fee to manage the rehab process, or do I have to put that to an open fair and open process? Because both the property manager and my organization as the owner have knowledge of the property.
So let me just back up. So your organization is a nonprofit also?
Correct.
Okay.
But we're a land conservancy.
Okay.
And you already own the property.
We acquired the property. It was foreclosed, and we acquired it, and
now this other nonprofit is managing it for you, and you want them to be able to redevelop it also?
Yeah, they will do the long-term. They will own it long-term, and they will do a larger renovation of the property once they secure their permanent financing. But I don't know if I can pay them a project management fee, or if I need to do an open bid process to get a project manager to oversee that rehab.
Are you considered a subrecipient? Is your nonprofit considered a subrecipient or
I'm considered a developer?
Oh, you're considered a developer?
Yes.
Oh, well then no, you wouldn't have to go through a procurement process.
I don't?
Oh no, yeah, I thought you were a subrecipient.
No.
No. Yeah, if you're a developer, then sure. Yeah, you don't have to procure.
Oh, bless you. Okay.
Yeah, you have to remember procurement.
Bacon and all the other rules, but you don't have to procure.
Oh, good. Okay, thank you so much.
You remember procurement only applies to subrecipients and the grantee, not developers themselves.
Okay.
You do, in order to be a developer, and David and I were whispering to each other, you do need to have site control. So that's so between you, I mean, you have
it. Yeah.
You're a developer. You have a lot of flexibility in how you.
Yeah.
Oh, great. Okay, well, you just made my day. Thank you.
All right.
Great.
All right, who's our next caller?
We'll go next to Jason Pearson with New York State Housing Finance Agency.
Hi there. I have a question regarding obligation that I thought I had the answer to until some new information came to light yesterday, so I'm hoping you can resolve the conflict. But New York State has two recipients of funds that are going to be used for Type A financing mechanisms. They are loan funds that are taking NSP funds drawn down in a lump sum, combined with other private funds, and then used to pay for acquisition and rehab costs of foreclosed properties. And the question is, when can those NSP funds that have been drawn down in a lump sum been obligated? I had been under the understanding that they could not be obligated all in whole at the time of the lump sum drawdown, but rather are obligated along with or per the same other obligation definitions that are operable. However, one of our subrecipients who's creating this fund posed this same question through to HUD online and got a different answer, saying that in fact they could be obligated all at once at lump sum drawdown.
Yeah, it really kind of depends on whether you're required to have them, essentially. And so, you know, without getting into all the details here on the phone, I think it's safe to say that there are circumstances where a grantee is required to post a deposit or a lump sum of funds with an institution as part of a financial transaction. And in that case, it could be. New York City's loan loss reserve fund partially works that way.
Right.
However, just because you want to draw it down and deposit it doesn't mean that the bank necessarily requires it. So it really depends on the structure of the deal and the fact that somebody's telling you we need to have it.
It also depends, I think, on the purposes of the use of the money, right, John? Because in New York's case, you guys have said that if it's for individual acquisition rehab, then it's done as the units are identified. But if it's a loan loss reserve or some sort of deposit that the bank has required to hold kind of in return for being willing to lend, then that's a different situation.
Right. So that's why these are pretty tricky, and I'd encourage you to write.
There is no one-size-fits-all here.
Yeah.
And part of our funds are actually going to the New York City Fund. This is why I'm so familiar with this. And so just as you described is how I've been thinking it worked. But we have another city that's essentially doing the exact same thing, except there's no loan loss. I guess is...
Yeah, well, that's the problem is that there isn't, as I understand it, and I think I know which city you're talking about, there isn't, funds aren't being deposited when they're not funding a loss reserve in that case.
Right. Correct.
So it has to be necessary, basically. It's a sort of necessity test, I guess.
Yeah.
But, I think it can be done, as you've seen in New York City and with this first project you described. But in the second case, I read the question, and it looked fine to me, and then somebody said, well, they're not depositing the funds. And I went, really? So these are one-offs that you need to talk to us about.
Okay. How do I do that? Because I know I don't want to eat up time for.
Yeah, that's fine. Just write it into the
ask a question.
Yeah, ask a question on the resource exchange, www.hud.gov/NSPTA.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
Okay, our next caller, please.
Jeremy Zeller with Department of Commerce, Oklahoma. Your line is open.
Hey, yes, I'm calling in regards of some foreclosed properties that were donated to the city. Is that considered vacant property, or once it goes to the city, they are establishing it as vacant, but at one point in time it was once a foreclosed property. And I'm mainly asking this to see if we can count properties like that towards the 25% rule.
Who donated them?
I believe it was the banks. That's my understanding.
Okay. Well, it kind of depends on when, this gets into these timing things. So if you have a group of organizations or whatever that, has an NSP program and you're planning to acquire and treat foreclosed properties, and somebody gives you foreclosed properties, and you're a member of that organization, then they probably qualify.
Right, because you had the intent to use NSP funds on them when you received them, right? But
if they donated them 2 years ago, perhaps, or something like that, it might not be.
Yeah, I think in a lot of these cases, these are properties that they've had that have been vacant for a while, and they wanted to see if they could just, build new on it, and if that would count towards the 25%.
Well, if they were foreclosed until they donated them, and if they donated them after you have your NSP program, then it's possible that they could qualify.
Yeah. But if they had the property prior to
the situation you're describing, no.
Okay.
No, not towards the 25% set aside, but certainly towards eligible use E.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay, our next caller, please, and we do have, just for John and David's purposes, we do have about 12 people who are waiting to ask questions.
Okay.
We'll go next to William Bedford with Florida Department of Community Affairs.
Hi, this is William. I wanted to ask a quick question to reaffirm my understanding on the appraisal, that it's acceptable to make an offer and have it accepted before an official appraisal is complete, and also the issue of it being an independent appraisal, that we understand it needs to be independently selected through some type of procurement process, 3 phone calls, whatever, but it needs to be independent from the REO or the bank's company or their own appraisal.
Yeah, typically we would.
Bank's appraisal.
Yeah, we've allowed you to use the bank's appraisal, or you can have a roster of appraisers that you've procured.
Right. Yeah, I think the only issue here is that while you can wait to have the appraisal done until your bid is received, you want to make sure that you're in the ballpark, right? Because if you end up submitting a high bid and the appraisal comes in lower, then you're going to be in trouble, right? That's assuming the seller doesn't want to drop the price, right? So.
Well, now, are we talking about letting the bank's realtor set an amount that's going to be paid after it's sold to them? How is that legal?
Bank's realtor? No. The banks typically have their own appraisers.
Right.
They contract with appraisers, and they'll have appraisals done on properties. So in some cases, they may say, we just had an appraisal done on this property.
It has to meet the HUD. It has to meet the Uniform Relocation Act standards. So if the appraiser's independent, even if they're working for the bank, that's okay. If it's the banker's sister-in-law, then maybe not.
If the bank is the owner, how could that not be a conflict of interest? Because they normally use that realtor. They would wait till after the property's sold to find out how much they're going to get.
You're going back and forth between realtor and appraiser. Are we talking appraiser or realtor?
Well, I'm speaking about the bank or REO that owns the property.
Right.
Whoever owns the property. Let's say it's the bank. They normally have 1 or 2 realtors that they use for appraisals. For appraisers to do appraisals.
Okay.
I'm sorry. I said I meant appraiser.
Well, we have standards. We have a policy guidance piece on appraisals on our website, and it describes the standards for the appraisal. Appraisers are supposed to be independent entities, and if their appraisal meets the standards of the Uniform Relocation Act, and they're certified, they're state certified or whatever, then we're going to assume that they're independent and they're not going to be, shading the price for the seller.
But you're not obligated to use that appraisal. You can certainly pay for another appraisal. That's up to you.
All right.
Okay,
thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Let's move on to our next caller, please.
We'll go next to John Turner with City of Columbus, Ohio.
Yes, hi. I work for a land bank that is based within a municipality that is also the grantee. And we've acquired many foreclosed upon houses, and we're trying to figure out what is the best way to obligate funds for future holding costs through the expenditure period. An example would be utility costs or other costs that it's problematic to enter into a contract at this time.
Well, so who's managing them? You're just managing them. The city staff are doing that work. Is that what?
It's a combination of city staff and contractors that we hire.
Okay. Well, you might want to listen in on the obligations call because Paul Webster is more knowledgeable than we are on some of the nitty gritty. But if you have a contract, that'd be fine.
These are ongoing costs.
But we allow. We also allow you to estimate your activity delivery costs, which could include the maintenance, some of the things that the city staff are doing if the costs are reasonable. So I don't know if you've looked at the obligations guidance that came out a couple weeks ago, but I think it has some information that might be helpful. And again, on Monday, maybe you could get a finer-tuned answer from Paul Webster.
Okay.
Okay, let's move on to our next questioner.
Sherry Soquist with City of Minneapolis, your line is open.
Hi, thank you for taking my question. My question is related to Activity A, In Minneapolis, we have allocated $500,000 in Activity A financing for at least 25 commitments of up to $20,000 in down payment and closing cost assistance for low-income home buyers of NSP1 rehabilitated homes. Our question has to do with obligations. The April 2010 NSP policy alert on obligations for specific activities states that an obligation can be linked to a specific address and or household. May we obligate Activity A financing down payment assistance to a specific address now to provide a to-be-identified low-income household with sustainable home ownership in an NSP1 rehabilitated home?
Maybe. So let me.
Well, maybe it's good. Thanks.
Let me ask. How? I mean, are you doing other things to these properties, or this is a freestanding financing program where that somebody goes out and buys a house and fixes it up, and then comes to you when it's all done and says, "I need a $20,000 write-down"?
No, these are our NSP1 Activity B homes that we're rehabilitating that we want to set aside for households at 50% AMI, and adding in the financing makes it sustainable to them over time.
Okay, so that's just home ownership assistance.
Yeah, I think that's really Activity B myself, and the problem could be that what we've been telling people is that if you're putting into, let's simplify it, let you buy the house for 100% of the cost, and that's $50,000, and you put another $50,000 into fixing it up, and then you want to sell it to somebody and you want to write it down by $25,000, you don't need another $25,000. You've already got total development costs covered, so you really don't have anything more to obligate. You're just getting less.
That's the double dipping question.
In the way of sales.
Well, what we've done is we've allocated about $25,000 to our NSP1 developers to rehab homes, and they could sell it to someone who's not at 50% AMI, and we want to make it affordable to someone who's at 50% AMI, and that's why we want to provide the $10,000 to $20,000 in down payment assistance.
But here's the thing: since you already drew funds down from the Treasury, I think we have a Q&A up on the website, right, Marcia?
Yeah.
Yes, we do.
Yeah. If you already drew funds down from the Treasury to acquire the house, and then you drew other additional funds down to pay the developer to rehab the house, right? Any home ownership assistance that you're providing, whether it be for down payment assistance, would be a reduction of principal. So that's coming out of the funds that you've already received. It just means you're going to get back less than you.
In our case, I don't think so, because we made our NSP1 developers leverage their funds, so they had to go find other resources to match the NSP funds. So if they needed $50,000 in development gap, and we only gave them $25,000. They had to find it elsewhere.
Okay, so you didn't use
all NSP funds? No, we did not use NSP to acquire.
To acquire it.
No, only for our rehab gap, and it varies among developer, and it's not always the whole development gap.
Okay, but if you've got $25,000 or more in any particular property, and now you want to put $25,000 in to write down the sales.
Right, to make it affordable to someone at 50% AMI, because right now the NSP1 developer could sell it to someone at 80 or 90 or 120, but we want to bring low-income homeowners in there.
So they can sell it at what you tell them they can sell it at based on your contract with them.
Right. Right now they can sell it at up to 120 AMI, but
so if you want to do
this would be an incentive to bring it down to 50% AMI.
I think what John and David are saying, just to jump in, is that you could forgive it. Let's say you put $25,000 in development assistance in there. Rather than requiring any kind of repayment of the $25,000, you could instead require the owner or the seller to write down the price by the $25,000. So John and David, the question really comes in when if that write down is insufficient to make it affordable to the low-income buyer.
That's
or
right.
if you write down all $25,000, but they really need $50,000 of help, let's say.
And you draw it down in addition.
Could you put more down for the difference?
Yeah. If the $25,000 is in excess of everything you have in it already, then yes, you can commit it to a property. If it's less than you have in it already, then you can't.
Right.
Okay.
Make sense?
It does. I think we'll need to work this out before we go ahead and do that, but the answer makes sense. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Sure.
And again, please feel free to use the ask a question as you think it through if you have more questions.
Okay, and then how can we, will there be something in writing to provide us guidance to move forward with this, or?
Again, the transcript of this conversation will be up on the website, so you should be able to access that.
Okay, wonderful.
We have a
Thank
Q&A
you.
up that speaks to the double dipping rule.
Right.
All right. Thank you.
Sure.
Okay, we only have about a half an hour left, and we do have about 15 people in the queue, so we may not be able to get through everybody. So if folks could keep their questions as short as possible, try to hit everybody's questions. So our next question, please.
We'll go next to Mike Gilchrist with City of Mesquite, Texas.
Hi, I just have a question. Excuse me. I just have a question related to the acquisition of HUD foreclosures. We were informed at the NSP problem-solving clinic that was held in Dallas in February that we needed to be sure to include either provisions in the contract or addenda that would ensure that we're able to complete environmental review and appraisals and everything, and that would make the purchase of properties contingent on those things.
Right.
And the problem we ran into in attempting to acquire HUD foreclosures was that the asset managers on the local level weren't willing to sign any paperwork that wasn't promulgated by HUD. And so
we have something up now that's promulgated by HUD, so
great.
You can get it on we have an FAQ.
It's on the,
okay, isn't it?
Are you talking about the letter?
It's Chris, yeah. Yeah, we have our environmental attorney approved some language, and
on the contingent purchase agreement. Yeah.
It's up.
Yeah. If you go on the website and what would it be under?
It's actually in one of the FAQs, David. There's an FAQ that answers this exact question.
Right.
Do you happen to know if the FAQ will refer me to the location where I would find that language?
It actually has the language extracted in it in the FAQ.
Okay, that's how you did it. Okay.
Yeah, and if you're running into problems, the home ownership centers, I don't know which one you're under, maybe Denver, they're getting better information about what they can do with these properties. So sometimes the local folks don't know, and a lot of these folks have not done FHA insurance recently, so I don't blame them, but I think the Hawks are now getting better information and realize that they have some room to move on these things.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
Good luck.
All right. Next question, please.
We'll go next to William Popko with New Jersey Department of Community Affairs.
Hello. I was wondering if new construction can count towards the 25% set-aside, provided that the site satisfies the foreclosure abandoned criteria?
Yes.
Good. I was also wondering...
before we leave that, though, guys, don't forget it has to be foreclosed or abandoned residential, so it's not any old foreclosed or abandoned.
Right. Okay. Also, a public housing authority which received NSP 1 funds from us, they're going to be constructing a new mixed-income residential complex on the site that was formerly public housing. Provided that, let's say, 40% or so of those new units that will be constructed with non-NSP 1 funds, but they will be restricted to 50% AMI or lower households. Can that count towards the 25% set-aside? The demolition funds that were provided, the NSP 1 demolition funds that were provided, to fund a portion of the demo.
Okay, the 25% set-aside counts on a dollar basis, not on a unit basis.
Mm-hmm.
So what we're tracking is how many dollars from your total NSP1 allocation were used to serve this population. To the extent that you're leveraging other sources is great, but we're still tracking dollars.
Right, and if you've got 40% that are non-low income, for example, you can do that. You just can't count those for your set aside, but you can count a proportion of a number of units, assuming they meet all the other requirements.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
Sure.
Okay, next caller, please.
We'll go next to James Brahman with Cloudburst Group.
Hi. I'm working with a state that has a subrecipient who's a housing authority, and they, in the past, had acquired a property that had been abandoned and had started redeveloping it. It's a pretty good-sized property. It was residential, and they are redeveloping it for townhouses, and they were doing it under tax credits, and the deal fell apart. What they want to do now is to use NSP funds to continue the redevelopment of it, and they do want to count it under the 25% set aside for very low-income persons. The question, I think, turns on when the property was acquired as an abandoned property. And so I want your confirmation of that if it had been acquired by them prior to the time they got their funds from the state, then it seems to me that it would not qualify. Am I correct in that?
I think the issue is the intent to use NSP funds, right? Were they acquired with the intent to use NSP funds on the project, or was NSP an afterthought?
NSP was an afterthought in this case.
Then you have a problem there.
Yeah. Well, that was my assumption. They have another property that was commercial or industrial, I don't recall which, and they had got it partly redeveloped as residential, and it's another thing where things fell apart on that, and they want to continue the redevelopment of this property as residential, and they would like to count this as under the 25% set aside, and I thought the fact that it was not residential initially might be a block to that. What do you think?
I'd be inclined to think that if they started it, we've been looking at what the zoning is when you start the NSP involvement. So it sounds to me like they would have had to rezone it prior to starting this new development, and so I don't have a problem with that part of it. I'm not sure that I don't understand whether it qualifies as foreclosed or abandoned or whether that matters, but that might be a little trickier.
Well, then it reverts to the earlier issue of when did they acquire it? When was it acquired as an abandoned or
right? If they got it, if they picked it up 6 months ago, probably okay. A year and a half ago, probably not.
Okay, I think you've answered my questions. Thank you.
Okay, Jim.
Bye.
Thanks, Jim. All right, next question, please.
We'll go next to Clarence Brown with Miami-Dade County.
Yes, thank you. We're trying to, under eligible use D, demolish a unit, and trying to pull a permit, discovered that there are code violation liens. Can we use NSP to pay any of those code violation liens?
Who owns the property?
It's privately owned.
Right. Whose liens are they? You're Miami-Dade, right, Clarence?
Yeah. It's the homeowner has received code violation liens.
Right. Whose liens are those?
The actual homeowner.
No, who imposed them?
Oh, I'm sorry. The county, our building department, actually placed the liens.
So the county placed the liens on, and they're technically considered abandoned.
Yes, the home is vacant and abandoned and blighted. It's been determined to be an unsafe structure.
So it should be fine.
Yeah, I think they're okay. This rule really kind of applies more narrowly than people think. There's a rule that says you can't acquire properties from yourself for more than the price of closing and incidental costs to the sale. In this case, though, you don't own the property. Miami-Dade doesn't own the property, and just as if you were paying off tax liens on a mortgage that a bank owned, those are necessary to clear title. So
yeah,
you're okay
Code
on
enforcement
that.
liens would be the same way.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Thanks, gentlemen.
Okay, sure, Clarence.
All right, next caller, please.
We'll go next to Stephanie Burgess with City of Sterling Heights.
Hello.
Hey, Stephanie.
Hi. How are you?
Good.
Good. Quick question about obligating administration funds. In the beginning, we're told that we have a maximum of 10% in to obligate those funds for the 4 years that we're going to be doing the projects. Now, what happens, say our original allocation or entitlement was $2.5 million, if we're only able to obligate $1.8 million by September 30th, does our maximum for administration funds get dropped then?
No, you take that. You write a check for $700,000. So let me spell my name, John. No, you can keep those. There's some information in the obligations memorandum that Paul wrote that talks about that. Now, what Paul will say is up to 10% because you have to justify those costs. But let's assume you can justify up to 10%. We recognize that you will have costs after month 18, and you have agreed to implement this program, and therefore you're okay.
So at this point, it won't automatically be dropped down. I'm hoping that we can obligate, but I don't know. The other thing, as far as monitoring visits, with all of the guidance coming out, I hate to say it's so late. We're 13 months into an 18-month program. How kind?
It's a 4-year program, so.
Well, as far as obligating the funds, we're,
right.
That's.
But some of those obligations may fall off, and
Well, I'm just concerned. We're having monitoring visits. I keep all of my emails. I keep a lot of the frequently asked questions because they change and you have the different dates on it. But are they going to take that in consideration because they had said this is such a high-risk program? You needed to push the money out, and now the guidance coming in that kind of contradicts what was coming out in the beginning.
Right. We understand that this is a new program for everybody, and we've been talking to our bosses, including Yolanda Chavez, and trying to get some guidance out. We're actually hoping to maybe do a webinar on this to say, well, there's things that are very important and there's things that are somewhat less important. There are policies that have stayed consistent, and there are policies that we have, sort of adapted as we've gone along. So it's kind of like promising you will be reasonable and then trying to define that. But I think everybody recognizes that, as long as there's no fraud or abuse or incompetence or waste, or really stupid stuff, then, we may have to make monitoring findings, but we don't always have to send you to, Rikers Island for the rest of your life.
The concern is, paying back with non-federal funds because, all of the communities right now, especially we're in Michigan, we're just hammered.
Yeah.
The thought of having to pay anything back really makes you not want to spend any more money.
No, I think that's a problem myself. I mean, just speaking personally, it's hard to be successful when you keep looking over your shoulder. So we understand that, and at the same time, as you say, I mean, a program that's based on a lot of sort of fraudulent real estate is probably, prone to abuse in some cases too. So, we're trying to walk that line and not, not be unduly punitive, but also, enforce the laws.
Sure.
But I think that, going after, I mean, I would think that, that repayment is farther down the list of options. We're not going to start with that.
Yeah.
Okay, that was my big concern. I think I should probably send John a Christmas card because I've gotten to know him so well with all the emails that I've sent him.
Yes, I know. You're going to be quoting those emails to the auditors and go, but he's always is.
Well, I've got them all in a binder.
Oh, great. Yeah, well, I'm getting the calls from the auditors, too. Let me tell you.
All right, well, thank you very much.
Okay, guys, we have about 15 minutes left to go, and we have about 10 questions pending. So our next question, please.
We'll go next to Leni Hoffman with Central Minnesota Housing Partnerships.
Hi, I'm working with a buyer-driven program, and I'm just wondering if having a copy of the short sale letter in the file will be proof enough of the foreclosed status.
Well, everybody's foreclosures laws are different. I mean, you could only buy it at a short sale if it had started into foreclosure in Minnesota. Is that? I mean,
typically they're 60 or 90 days past due.
Right.
You know, there's some talk things may change with banking rules, but typically that's what it is before the lender's going to negotiate with them.
Yeah, I think you'd be better off if you could get just a short letter from the lender that says this loan was at least 60 days delinquent, so that you have that, because just buying it at a short sale to me isn't absolutely conclusive. But
yeah, and I mean the other piece I'm thinking is though you need something from the seller to ensure that it was a voluntary acquisition, right?
We have an NSP addendum. We have them.
Right.
It goes with our purchase agreement. But
do you think you could get a letter from the lender, or
the problem we sometimes run into is the Privacy Act issues.
Would the seller already have a letter from the lender saying that the mortgage was delinquent?
Sometimes, but again, they're not always wanting to share that stuff. That's why we're just kind of trying to find out. I mean, we've been able to do things and put things in there, but I was just wondering if the short sale letter was enough, or if I had to keep getting that extra piece.
Yeah, I don't know. It's hard for us to comment because foreclosure laws are so different and we're so ignorant. But I would personally feel a little more comfortable with a letter. I mean, it might even be something that you could get the seller to certify, that the loan was delinquent, and make some kind of statement, or at least you have something to go on.
So seller certification or their realtor certification that knows the situation?
Yeah, I mean, considering it is a short sale, right, you want to demonstrate that all parties involved voluntarily went through this process, that you, the buyer, are not driving this.
Well, but
right?
She's also trying to establish that it's foreclosed, so...
yeah, and like I said, this is a buyer-driven program, so it's not the city buying it. It's a homeowner buying it from another homeowner.
The city's helping to broker the deal.
We're just providing DPA for the deal.
Yeah. So, I mean, to the extent that the seller wants to sell, there should be some support there to get some documentation that's needed.
Okay.
Do the best you can.
All right, thanks.
All right, thanks very much. Our next caller, please.
We'll go next to Shelley Branson with Parent County Housing Partnership.
Hi, guys.
Hi.
You're talking to someone who's NSP confused, so
okay.
I'm just going to lay out there what we're doing. I want to make sure that we're looking at doing some land banking, and we have some properties that we're looking at purchasing that were foreclosed on by the county and were reverted back to the owners, who is a city. And we're going to purchase those properties from them. Now, they are vacant properties that are in residential neighborhood, zoned residential, and we're looking at purchasing them and doing new construction on those properties.
So when did the city get them?
The city has had them probably for, I believe, maybe 6 months to a year, possibly.
And you're a nonprofit that's
yes.
buy them from the city. Who's the grantee? Who gets the NSP funds? The city?
No, the state.
The state. Oh, well, I think you're okay then. It's the city were the grantee, and they were paying themselves through you for these properties. That'd be a problem. Since the state is giving the the state's giving the nonprofit the funds directly.
Yes, we're a subrecipient.
And you're going out and buying it from a county.
And we're going out and buying them from the city.
Yeah, you're okay.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, and one question too. Under the use, it states that these properties, if we purchase the properties under land banking and do the new construction, it says that it has to be turned quickly. What is quickly?
Quickly?
Well, I mean, to me, in my mind, when I hear land banking, I'm thinking we don't know what we want to do with this yet. So when you say new construction, that's like someday you're hoping, or where you have a developer?
Yeah, what's the timeline on that?
We're actually looking at purchasing 20 vacant properties and doing them in phases over the next 10 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's okay. Yeah, that's fine. I mean, I guess we've seen some questions where people, talk about land banking, but they really are just kind of holding on to the properties temporarily until they start developing them, which isn't really land banking. But as you know, the 10 years is sort of the outside time for a unit. But if you're planning on counting them for your 25% set aside, we're not going to go past 4 years on those. So.
Okay. And also, because this particular zip code was not part of our original, we're adding it. We've already done the environmental on the county itself as much as we could in a broad environmental.
Right.
Do we have to go back out and do the notices and the ROF and all that?
It depends on if these are in a target area for which you did a Tier 1 environmental review and had the funds released, and now you're coming in and adding some new properties that are basically the same as what you did originally, and you would of course have to take into each individual property and make sure that it's not covered under floodplain or historic or whatever. But if the original Tier 1 review was done in a broad enough way to physically and sort of programmatically encompass what you're talking about doing now, then no, you wouldn't have to repeat that. You would still have to clear each individual property. But
okay, because we did not include the zip code. We included the city, but not the zip code in there. But it is an eligible zip code for NSP.
When you say you didn't include it in what, the environmental review?
Yes, in the broad environmental review.
Well, then I think you need to maybe go back and amend that and get the release of funds for those, yeah. I mean, anytime you have a new area, you haven't really, you haven't covered it for your first cut on the environmental review, so.
Okay, so even though we put the city in there, but not that particular zip code.
Well, I mean, again, I don't know. Well, we can't spend too much time on this, but it has more to do with the substance of the review. Does the review talk about this neighborhood, or doesn't it?
Okay.
All right.
All right. Thank you.
Okay, I think we probably have time for maybe one or two more questions. So who's our next caller? We'll go next to Jennifer Olson with State of Montana.
Hi there. Thanks for taking my question. I have just a short one. We have been selling houses, or the grantees have been selling houses, and we've been earning program income, but we are unsure of where to or how to enter that into DRGR.
Program income gets actually entered into your quarterly progress report, and maybe Marcia probably knows more about this, but we still haven't. I don't think we've kind of figured out a way to merge these two things. So,
and that's what we saw really, was that the only place to put it in would be in the QPR, and so when we put that in, we would want to put it in under specific grantees. I guess the other concern is that, we have specific grantees that we are working with, different cities, towns, and counties, and so we want to make sure that that program income that's been earned by a specific city doesn't affect, let's say, for instance, the county's ability to draw direct funds.
Well, it does. I mean, program income is program income, so you're going to have to net it off. You're going to have to net it out against your next draw. So if you have a cost, let's say your next project costs $100,000 and you have $20,000 worth of program income, what you would enter into the DRGR is $80,000, and then you'd have the $20,000 showing up as the program income. But you, as the state, have to kind of manage this as one big happy set of money, and so, and it's not hurting you. I mean, we're not holding it against you in the sense that it increases the difficulty of reaching the 100% obligation. But as far as having cash around, if you've got cash around from Bozeman, and then somebody on the other side of the state needs money, you have to use the money from Bozeman first as far as HUD's concerned. I mean, you can keep separate records, and if you promised it to them, so forth and so on, but you can't keep program income around for a federal project.
Although, John, it probably depends on who they allowed to keep the program income, because if they allowed Bozeman to keep the program income in Bozeman, not to be repaid to the state, and then Great Falls has a draw as a different grantee, I presume that wouldn't be a problem. It's if Bozeman has paid back the state and now it's sitting at the state, it needs to be used first.
Marcia's from Montana, so she's going back here, Jennifer.
That's why we like Marcia. So exactly. So if that program income, we tell the grantee that they have to keep that, and we don't take it back at the state, I guess before the obligation deadline, is that different than after the obligation deadline, simply because there won't be any more direct funds to really access after September?
Yeah, I think what you're going to be looking for from that sub-grantee is that they're counting it towards the allocation that it'll be counted towards the allocation that they receive. And they have to have some eligible activities in mind that they're going to be using that money on. It's not just sitting with them.
Sure. And we've got, specifically we've got sales of houses and rehab going on, so a lot of what our program is eating up right away. Right. It's just now how we're entering it into DRGR. Yeah. So internally we've been doing that. We just couldn't figure out how to actually put it into DRGR.
Yeah, I think you guys need to have a tracking system, and I know Kentucky has a good one for this, so Ann might be able to share it with you. Ann was on the phone earlier, where you are, whenever a sub-grantee wants to be able to use their NSP money or wants to come in for a new draw from you for NSP, that you know the program income on hand and you're netting that out before you let them draw.
Exactly, yeah. And just one last question. Will you be doing a TA session about program income? Because I've got a slew of other questions. I'll refrain from asking them right now. But
yeah, we will. We know that's a crazy area for people.
Okay, well, thanks so much.
You might listen in on Monday to Paul Webster's piece on obligations, too, because he's also the king of program income.
Okay, great.
Thank you. David, I know you have to leave at 3:30. Can you take one more call? I'm sorry?
You can do one last one.
One last one. Okay, so one last call, operator.
Agnes Chambers with Louisiana Housing Finance Agency. Your line is open.
Ooh, I feel like I am a lucky girl today. So much. The question I had was regarding the detailed estimate that you would require from developers so that we can obligate funds. Does it matter if that detailed estimate comes from the developer rather than the construction contractor, since at that point they may not know who they're going to use?
No, I mean, I think what you just need to make sure is that it's a valid number. Lots of developers have their own. It depends on the skill level of developer. They have their own in-house contracting companies and things like that. If it's somebody that's just the one guy with a computer and a pickup truck, you might want something a little bit more. But so you really want to know.
It's got to stand up for itself. I think that's the bottom line here.
Okay. And one more question regarding the purchase of HUD REOs. If they're not currently in the designated census tract, what process does the grantee have to go through to get those included?
Well, we've allowed some limited activity outside of the area of greatest need in certain cases. One or two kinds of properties maybe. If you start, if all your properties start ending up being outside your target area, then you need to amend the application, the action plan. It's not a complicated process. It does take a little time. It does require a 15-day notice, a public notice, but it doesn't require hearings. Technically, it doesn't require HUD approval, although we always encourage you to talk to your field office about it. So a couple is okay. Once it starts to be more than a trickle, I would say you're probably looking at an amendment. Does that make sense?
Okay. I'm sorry.
Okay. Thank you very much for all the questions. We do have I know we did have probably about 10 people who were still in the queue who were not able to get to. So a couple things for everybody who was not able to get their questions answered. Please go ahead and feel free to put it into the Ask a Question on the website, and I have that web address up for you if you haven't seen it before. Also, this session, I think, has been very successful, and we're grateful to John and David doing it. And it will be repeated, I guess, probably next week or the week after, and a listserv notice will go out about that. We also do ask that you do an evaluation of this session to let us know whether you thought it was helpful to you, if you'd like these to continue, if there are any alternate sessions you'd like to see held or additional sessions.
Or how we could change this.
Yeah. So there's a survey on SurveyMonkey. It's very short. It's probably only 10 questions, and they're all click boxes. So we ask that you go into that and fill it out for us and let us know your thoughts or what else you'd like to see provided to you.
Yeah, I'm really sorry this meeting was rescheduled without our knowledge, basically. So I really apologize. We got the notice out late, and we're cutting this thing off early. So everybody gets one free monitoring finding.
John says.
Yeah, really. You can take that to the bank.
Right. Well, thank you, everybody. Again, please let us know your feedback. We're interested in hearing it, and watch for announcements about future sessions. And thanks to John and David for spending the time with us and answering so many questions. So thanks again, everybody.
Thank you, Marcia.
Marcia, could we speak offline for a second?
Sure, I'll call you, David.
All right, thanks.
Bye-bye.